Today I'm going to do a sculpture using carving foam. And it's a material that I haven't shown on the channel before, but it's really great. And I want to show it to you and give you some ideas as to how to use it. It's easy, it's fast, it's fun, and you can just let your imagination go and just play and have a great time. Here's the drawing that I'm working from. It's just something out of one of my sketchbooks, but it's perfect for the project that I have in mind. I cut the drawing out and folded it down the seam so that I have a side view and a front view. And here's our foam. It's super lightweight sculptor's foam. I need a 2.5. by 2.5. block. This cuts easily with a handsaw. I mean, look, it just cuts like butter. So you can easily cut that with a handsaw, but I've got one, so let's go cut it out over on the bandsaw. Okay, bust out the spray mount, and I like to have a piece of waste paper underneath the thing so I don't get too much spray all over my bench top. Spray that on there, stick it on, fold it over. The good thing about sculptor's foam is that it cuts so fast and easy, and it cuts with just any tools at all. I'm helped by the fact that I've got this model skull that I'm going to be using kind of as my guide. So let's get carving. This is polyurethane foam, and it's sold by weight. This particular foam that I'm using is 2-pound foam, which means that a 1-foot block, a 12 by 12 by 12 inch block, weighs 2 pounds. And they sell it in 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on, densities of foam. The higher the density, the harder it is, the more difficult it is to carve, but also the more detail it will hold. So you can match the foam you buy to how much detail you want to hold, how smooth you want the surface to be. This is not polystyrene foam. That's packing foam. That's with the white beads, the small white beads. That's a completely different kind of foam, and it cuts with a hot knife, and it carves completely different, and it's just not the same product at all. So don't get confused. Don't buy polystyrene foam and then get disappointed that you didn't get PU or polyurethane foam. Polyurethane foam is readily available. There's a lot of different vendors that sell it online. Just Google carving foam or sculpting foam and make sure you're looking for polyurethane. You could also try using floral foam. It's similar to this foam that I'm using. It's soft, easily carved. It usually comes in a green color, and I know that a lot of people use that to make their sculptures from. So it's not difficult to find this stuff online. You don't need any specialized kind of tools. Most things cut this foam readily. I use the same tools I use for wax and clay, plus, grinding tools, scraping tools, files and rasps, all those sorts of things work fine. This stuff will carve with your fingernail. And weirdly, it smooths out really well just by rubbing it with your hand. At least it does with my dry, old, rough hands. Skin is the perfect finish sandpaper to put a nice smooth surface on this 2-pound foam. I've decided I don't like these teeth. They're too small and they're feeling just too anatomical for me. So here we go. Off to make some modifications and see what we can come up with. It's also really easy to work on the individual pieces before you glue them together. And there's a trick for doing that. You always want to keep your glue in the middle of the joints. You don't want it getting out anywhere near the edges. That's because when you hit a glue line, it's very, very difficult to carve and smooth an epoxy glue line because it's so much harder than the surrounding foam. It just doesn't work. So keep your glue on the interior of the joints and nowhere near the edges, and you won't run into that problem. Now what I'm going to do is cut a couple of plugs in foam. You'll see why in a minute. Did you see all those sparklies go into the air when I drilled those out? Yeah, I totally hold my breath. I just hold my breath whenever I'm machining this stuff, when it's really flying around in the air. It's one of the downsides to foam is the foam dust does fly around, and it's probably a good idea if you do a lot of it. If you're around this stuff a lot, to wear a good dust mask. I used to do sculptures for casinos and store displays and stuff like that. And we worked with massive quantities of this foam. And we all wore respirators all day long because our occupational exposure was so high at that time. Now I can round over the ends of both of these plugs, and that will make a nice pair of eyeballs. Oh! Put a nice divot in the head. Gotta fix that now. Okay, when you have a divot in the head, I just cut a clean landing here and a piece that fits into it, perfecto. But again, when you mix your epoxy, you don't want to get your epoxy anywhere near the edges, anywhere near where you can bump into it or cut into it while you're carving the foam, because you will have a rock hard seam, a rock hard line, and you will not be able to carve around it or smooth around it. The eyeballs are less critical because the glue is way down at the bottom and you're never going to get to it again. So it's not quite as critical to avoid putting the glue out near the edges. Pop those in there. Nice. See, that would be a reasonably complex thing to carve. As it was a very easy thing to fabricate. Where's my little repair piece? Here it is. Let's wedge that in there. Like that. All right, we'll let all that dry. Well, I've gone this far, so I decided to add on a body. I have no real plan. I'm just playing. I'm just exploring. And that's a really fun way to work. It's my favorite way to do artwork because if I start a piece off and it's all planned out, I tend to get bored during the process of going through all the pre-planned steps. So when I'm working for myself and on my own art, I just wing it and see what happens, see where the piece leads me. I would never do this for commercial work because when doing a job, you want to make sure that you reliably get to exactly what the client wants on time and on budget. That's a totally different thing. So there's lots of different ways to do stuff with foam. Here's a way to make a groove. Take a drill bit and it allows you to cut a nice half round. All right, I think I'm gonna leave this guy where he is right now. I started with a completely different idea in my head, wound up with this. I kind of went from skeleton to Stonehenge to, I don't know what this, some weird cartoon dude is. Anyway, you get the idea. It's a great material to work with. It's fast and it's fun. Of course, what I didn't say in the video was that it makes an absolute freaking mess. It's hideous. Get those sparkly dust all over everything. It's nasty, but still fun to work with. But it is nasty. When we were doing sculptures for casinos and theme parks and stores and stuff, we used to have to clean the studio with a snow shovel. All right. Sparklies everywhere.